Hello and welcome to the second episode of Update, a new web talk created by Vegconomist. My name is Nadine Filko. I'm an author and journalist. And before we jump into the discussion, I would like to thank our sponsor, Protein Distillery. Actually, today's talk is about one of the most important issues out there: inside products, recipe for a new conversation about ingredients. Why is this important? It's important because when we're going to events, I actually just experienced somebody saying Germany is eating, the people here are eating themselves sick. So what is about this story and how can we maybe create a new story for the market out there? To talk about this, I have invited Ian Botello, business developer at Protein Distillery, Christine Gold, founder of Thought for Food, and Gunnar Brune, business strategy consultant and founder of Tricolore Marketing. Welcome.
Hello.
Ian, would you like to tell us a bit more about your work and how you connect to ingredients?
Of course. First of all, thank you for this web talk, and I'm really excited to also hear from Gunnar and Christina. A small introduction about myself and Protein Distillery. I'm Ian, and I originally come from Mumbai in India, and my life has actually been surrounded by food. My family business, we used to manufacture bakery machines, and being from India, plant-based food was actually the norm and not the other way around. And I moved to Germany 5 years ago, and I was in Berlin for 4 years, the vegan capital of Europe, and that offered a different perspective to what plant-based food is. And I knew I had to be part of this somehow, and Protein Distillery was the way. And maybe to quickly also introduce what we do at Protein Distillery is we take the side stream of the brewing industry or spent brewer's yeast, and we make really functional yeast proteins out of it. But we can speak more about that and how it relates to the talk later.
Thank you so much, Ian. Christine, you held a speech last year at Food Ingredients Summit. How is your work connected to ingredients and to a new food system?
Yeah, actually, thank you so much for being here, everyone. And I think this is a really important discussion to be having. So I'm really excited to dive into some of the questions I know you want to cover today, Nadine. But my journey into the ingredient space started with agriculture, actually. So I grew up on a farm in the Midwest of the United States, and my father was a scientist at the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and he actually invented a food ingredient, which is kind of funny. So I learned from the youngest of ages, about the role that innovation can play in making new opportunities for agricultural products, right? So when I grew up on the farm, I was looking at the agricultural landscape, not just as a place to produce food, but actually for ingredients, materials, soil regeneration, et cetera. It was a place filled with possibility. And over the past decade, I've built an organization called Thought for Food, which is essentially an innovation community focused on transitioning our food systems to become more inclusive, more sustainable, more regenerative, more climate resilient. And we've seen so many exciting innovations come through on this space of ingredients, and particularly ingredients that can power the plant-based transition. So I'm excited to dive into some of the, exciting innovations I've seen, which were some of the things I talked about at Food Ingredients Europe, but also about that concept I think that you want to touch on, which is like, should we be talking about ingredients like proactively to consumers? How do we do that? There's been some missteps in the past when innovative ingredients have been introduced and overhyped, and they've led to, some of those problems that you've said with, unhealthy foods in the food system or consumer mistrust about the foods that they're eating. So this is really important that we see that there's possibilities around innovation ingredients, but we position this right in the context of the food system and consumer acceptance.
Thank you so much, Christine. And Gunnar, you are the marketing expert here. I'm really looking forward to, maybe developing some ideas how we should be talking the next story. How are you connected to ingredients so far?
So yeah, hello. I'm just happy to be here and looking forward to the discussion. So I have a marketing and strategy background, and I have a background with like almost permanently dealing with food. So I started with coffee, and I'm still kind of addicted to coffee. So for 6 years, I was leading the campaign for a coffee brand in Europe. Then I moved on to highly processed food. So I was managing director for an advertising company that, promoted highly processed food. And so we dived deep into what is happening there. And then just the opposite, for 4 years, I was marketing head for fruit and vegetable. And since then, I actually wrote a book about fruit and vegetable marketing, and I'm working with the trade press, so I have strong links to the German retail, and I'm in the jury for the most innovative sweets. That's called the Sweetie Award, and I'm in the jury for the most successful in food innovations. That's the bestseller, and we are giving the award based on the cashier data in the supermarkets. So I would like to bring in the kind of marketing professional view and maybe the voice of the customer and the narratives that are competing against each other.
I'm really excited that we have so many different backgrounds here coming together, because I think having different backgrounds brings us to the best solution to create a new story. But to start off, I would actually like to talk about, why do we have a problem at all? We're talking about ingredients, we're talking about additives, and we are talking about technical aid materials. What actually are the differences here, Ian?
Yeah, thanks. I think it's really important to also set the ground straight and having these definitions laid out. To me, ingredients are more like the fundamental components that are used to create a food product. And they remain present also in the final product. So in the context of plant-based products, it could be proteins like soy or pea or starches even. And additives, on the other hand, are maybe substances that are not so used in really small quantities, and they serve maybe a technological function rather, and are not usually consumed as foods by themselves. And again, in the context of plant-based products, it could be stabilizers, or like methyl cellulose, which is like the buzzword right now, or coloring, flavoring agents. And technical aid materials are mostly substances used in the processing of the food. And they don't have, they're not intended to be in the final product. And if they do, it's only in trace amounts. And an example could be enzymes that are used to like modify the protein structures, for example. And it's important to have these definitions like laid out straight, because it then sets the stage for a more nuanced conversation.
Definitely. I think most people out there don't really have a clue what they're talking about. And when preparing for this talk, I also talked to ingredient expert, and he told me, actually, when we're talking about ingredients, it doesn't make sense to talk about this ingredient is bad, that one is good, because it's like playing ping pong with scientific data. Now, Christine, last year you've been at the Food Ingredients Europe Summit, and you talked about food is medicine. Could you elaborate on that? What do you mean with this?
Yeah, sure. So, in fact, like one of the big things that I try to present in many of the talks I give, and I actually, Gunnar just published a book too, but it's highlighting the fact that, we can't decouple food and agriculture, right? And so when we think about like how food is produced, it impacts the nutrient density, for example, of crops. And we need to start to reframe how we talk about our food system through the lens of health and nutrition. And so much of our priorities to date have been around creating calories, right? And that's been around yield increases and getting to those yield increases through, helping crops prevent pests and diseases, and, focus on abiotic stresses and things like this. And so now we can actually like talk about the importance of addressing those factors, but by addressing those factors, we're actually creating healthier, hardier crops that can lead to positive impacts on the health of, you know, people eating them and consuming them. And so when we talk about food and medicine, it's really just like drawing that direct correlation between the diet that we pursue, how those food products are produced, and then the health outputs that we are able to achieve. And so there's a lot of interventions happening in the startup space right now around food as medicine. We're seeing, you know, home delivery kits. We're even seeing, you know, med tech platforms that are recommending diets. I think there's a lot of buzz around Ozempic and the acceleration that is bringing into different food portfolios. Nestle has just launched a specific product line for Ozempic users in the United States. But I think what's also interesting is, and so in a way, like, you know, that medical intervention is accelerating some of those things we've always wanted in the food systems transformation, to focus on health and nutrition. And there is, like I said, this startup energy. One of the things too that I think is interesting is that insurance companies are getting in the game too. There's been some experiments, particularly in the US, I know about, where insurance companies are offering lower premiums to consumers who follow healthy diets. So it's a proactive way to address, you know, this case of like, actually, we're going to like really address chronic illness through dietary interventions and be proactive about this by giving this carrot, you know, incentive to people. So that's the space. And, you know, again, I really think what Ian said is like really important, that there's a big difference between ingredients and additives and technical, you know, aspects that are going to be really important to regulatory groups and to food companies. But to the average consumer, they just want to know that what they're eating is safe. They want to also, there's an increasing demand to support their values within the food system. So they want to know like where their food is coming from, what type of agricultural system farmers are using. And if we can nudge people towards health and nutrition outcomes by using technology interventions, I think that's also, you know, a really exciting space for the market to dive into more deeply.
That was very interesting, because I think that's a new story already, talking about maybe personalized food for us. I would like to know Gunnar's view on this later on. Like, should we talk about medicine when we're talking about food, or is this maybe disconnecting emotion with food, and do we have to develop a whole new culture? But Ian, first of all, I would like to know from you, where does your product come in here? What is Protein about? And yeah, do you already identify with medicine, or are you telling a different story?
So I would like to speak more about like the additive part of it, because that's where the current consumers have their eyes on. Additives are controversial, right? And they always have a negative connotation right from the start. But it's important to, I think, speak a little bit more about it. In doing so, maybe taking a step back and understanding the role of additives as a whole in plant-based products. And the role till now has been to overcome like this lack of functionality in plant-based proteins. And this was needed in the transition, you know, of the industry as a whole and the growth of the industry. Because I guess previously the target group was just vegan consumers, and now has grown to flexitarians and people with like omnivorous diets. Before there weren't solutions, or the solutions available to replace these additives weren't there yet. But the industry is young, right? Established plant-based brands are not more than 15 years old. I would still consider them in their infancy. Also, the technology and new plant-based proteins that are being developed are by startups, and they're very new. I think we have to be more purposeful in communicating about these new ingredients. So protein as an ingredient is more than just an MC replacement, or that's how consumers, and when I say consumers, I mean producers of plant-based proteins, recognize it. But it's a more holistic value add. It's much more than MC replacement, because it's a circular ingredient, because it comes from the side stream of the brewing industry. At the same time, it has a really high protein content, and a complete amino acid profile, PDCAS of more than 1. And because it being really functional, it can also, be used in different verticals. And I think it's important to make this distinction really early on, because it's then with the collaborative efforts of industry experts or stakeholders in the food industry to refine the solution that protein brings and also make it accessible to all.
Now, should we focus on, telling stories about circle ingredients maybe? Because there's so much more about sustainable food supply when we not talk about an ingredient, an additive, but we talk about, for example, this circle ingredient. I've never heard before together. Gunnar, what's your view on this as a marketing expert?
Yeah, we like talking food is talking about almost everything. It's talking about survival. It's talking about politics. It's everything. So if we take a look at the current narratives, we have like the survival narrative, we have to feed the world. We have a health narrative. What we eat makes us sick. We have a performance narrative. I want to have more muscle. I have a climate narrative. If we go on producing food the way we do, we will all die. We have animal rights. We have enjoyment. Just take a look at the sweets industry. We have culture, like different cultural traditions. We have an industry skeptic consumer group. And we have the question for circular economy, which is not just climate, which is also the whole sustainable development goal discussion. So I think we could talk for hours. What I see at the moment is that the whole industry, if I take agriculture and everything as industry, not as industry as a kind of a industrial term, but as the branch, I think we enter into a new phase, and we enter into a new way of understanding what we are doing. We're not just doing what's possible, but we try to understand what is really happening. And by doing so, we use the means of today. So, for example, artificial intelligence, and we enhance things like fermentation, things like drying, or things like just centrifuge, whatever that is in English. So just parting ingredients of milk by gravity and stuff like that. So very simple things. They can solve things that we have done always, but now with new possibilities, we can do more stuff with what we do. And just like Ian said, our food production in a way produces a waste, and this waste does not have to be waste. Maybe there are great values in it, and we can have more enjoyment, health, and all the things I listed before. If we go back to how food used to be produced and put all the things we know today into it, and maybe create new meals and fascinating stuff.
So actually, we shouldn't be talking about ingredients at all, maybe. Maybe we just have to talk about a new way of eating and ingredient, not as an ingredient when it is used from waste, which was waste, like resources which were waste in the past. But before we get onto this, future talk about what ingredients actually are, I would like to know, because that's what we have to overcome. How are additives actually correlated to ultra-processed foods? Ian, could you give us some insights on that? Because I think it's very important to understand that there's a difference in, having bad additives and being ultra-processed, and people mix this up. So I would like to get this clear.
Yeah, I think this is a really complex question to answer very quickly, but maybe my 2 cents. In the current landscape, or maybe the previous landscape, additives did play a significant role in making plant-based products appealing and also accessible to the mass market. What do? They improve the taste and texture to meet consumer what the consumer wants. They extend shelf life, for example. They also ensure maybe consistent quality in production. But are they all bad? I don't think all additives are bad. For example, vitamins are considered additives, and vitamins for fortification is a good thing. It's not a bad thing at all. I think as technology and ingredient innovation progresses, we would be able to achieve what additives right now are achieving with more natural ingredients. And also, for example, the Clean Label project and consumer tests like in Germany, the Ökotest and Stiftungswarentest, I think they help in educating customers and also help in accelerating this transition to more natural ingredients. Speaking of ultra-processed foods and additive usage, of course, I think there is a correlation, but it's not inherently negative. I think a more nuanced perspective is needed because, as I said, vitamins for fortification is beneficial. And if it's considered ultra-processed because of this, it's something to be spoken about. Also, from the context of plant-based products specifically, a lot of them are considered processed foods, and this presents both a challenge and an opportunity. And I think companies like Protein Distillery, who consider this an opportunity, work on innovation, on ingredient innovation, also technology innovation, to have natural ingredients then with similar functionality to match the desired taste, bite, to replicate, for example, meat products and what the consumer wants, to have cleaner labels or fewer ingredients.
This is what makes it quite complicated. And talking about clean labels and mass market, Christina, do we need a new definition of ingredients? I mean, what was your experience? You've got a broad view actually on the food market. Where do we need to go? Do we have to talk something totally different?
Yeah, I mean, this conversation is like sparking so much. I mean, we could talk for hours. Like Gunnar said, it touches on so many issues. But one of the things that I definitely see in my vantage point is that, you know, there's culture wars right now, and food is emblematic of like the culture wars that are happening in general in society. I've spent my entire life and career working in food and agriculture. And what's interesting for me to see is that, you know, within the sustainable food movement, there is so much polarization, right? And ultra processed foods is like one of those hot topics that is kind of like, if you know, a few years ago when alt proteins was becoming a hot investment sector, you know, it was seen as like the boon for sustainability, for health and nutrition. And now there's a massive backlash actually against a lot of plant-based proteins because they're now analogous with ultra processed foods. And there's misinformation that's pervasive in the world about what ultra processed foods are and how they can or cannot be impacting our health and nutrition. And so while a few years ago, sustainability was a top concern, and that was particularly like during the COVID times, like I think everybody was thinking about climate and sustainable food systems. And like over the past couple of years since then, we've moved more into a focus on nutrition and health. And people are saying like, that's their priority. Of course, the top priorities we all know from everyone in the industry and every marketer is, you know, taste, texture, and price, right? Those are the main motivators for consumers. But for open-minded consumers who care about transitioning to a better food system, sustainability was a hot topic a few years ago, and now they're more focused on the health and nutrition and that clean label ingredient and, you know, aspect of naturalness is a big motivator. Now that's where we have a job, and I'm super curious to hear Gunnar's, you know, inputs on this, because I don't think it has to be an either or. You know, I have worked on the agriculture side on, you know, genetically modified foods and gene edited crops for many years. I have a strong position that we could make those part of regenerative agriculture and even organic production. If you really look at like what we're trying to achieve, these types of innovative crops can help us achieve outcomes that are positive for the planet, but people have their minds made up. You know, it's organic or gene edited, high-tech innovation. Do we have the chance to embrace this nuance and this complexity around food ingredients to say it doesn't have to be innovation or natural? Actually, we're innovating towards more natural, more circular ingredients. And I have a few examples. I'll just mention two of those right now. One is a company that we worked with in Mexico, Microterra. They're using Lemna, a fast-growing small aquatic plant, to clean water systems. They started working with aquaculture farms across Mexico. And then they're giving a new income stream to the farmers to grow Lemna, to clean their ponds, which otherwise they would like take their polluted water and dump it into the environment. And then they're processing that Lemna to create food ingredients, right? First serving the alternative protein market, and now they have a functional ingredient that improves the sweetness and flavor profile of foods it's incorporated with. Another company we worked with in Brazil is using a byproduct from cocoa production as also a natural sweetener. And they're actually also supporting the farmers that they work with to transition to agroforestry production systems. So they're reinvesting in those farmers. And another Mexican company called Zelina, now Creative Food Labs, they're creating xylitol, which is really important as another sweetener, particularly for diabetics, from crop waste. So they're using synthetic biology to convert corn byproducts into xylitol. And they actually have done this at a cost that's lower than synthetic xylitol. So the point is, this is a really interesting story if we're able to captivate consumers around this, because it's a win for the environment, for farmers, and for consumers. And it's giving us, you know, natural sweeteners. The confectionery market around, you know, like healthier confectionery products is growing. People care about this. So, you know, this type of win-win-win value proposition is a story we have the chance to tell. And it's also exciting that it's being spearheaded by startups and not by industry leaders, you know, who have like a profit motivation that is, you know, and maybe a bit of mistrust in the market. The industry should be partnering with these startups to help them scale and have a deeper penetration to consumers. But it's exciting that it's, you know, it's really this next generation of entrepreneurs that's forging new possibilities in our food system. So I'd like to see more bridges being built between natural and innovation versus the polarization that we're experiencing, you know, so abjectly right now, which is detrimental to what we're trying to achieve for food systems transition.
I mean, the term naturalness plays a crucial role, not only when we're talking about ingredients, but also when we're, as you said, talking about GMOs, talking about cultivated meat, talking about fermentation. Gunnar, could you give me your insights marketing-wise when we're talking to consumers? And now we have to get a bit more specific, because when we're talking to consumers, we shouldn't have like this broad view. We're actually talking to very many different target groups. We're talking to different cultures, different eating habits in different countries. And how can we cope with this? How can we make this happen?
Well, first we have to accept the consumers and their opinions to be able to interact with them. And I would like to add to what Christina said, that in the expert bubble, and especially in the UK and in the US, we have a very strong narrative against highly processed food, which does have sometimes a bias, and you know, it's getting a bit complicated if some good stuff is being penalized by it. On the continent, like old Europe, I would say that we do not have this high processed food bashing at the moment. We are looking over the channel and over the ocean and looking at it and waiting when it's coming here, but we don't have it. I think we do not have it here as a consumer trend. Consumers here who tend naturally to tend towards more natural products. And I think the industry follows, and maybe we do not have this discussion the way the UK or the United States or Canada has it. That being said, we are on the same path. I think all over the world, we reinvest in more natural recipes. I do not care. We have the translation issue anyway with ingredient, which is in Germany Zutat und Inhaltsstoff. So let's say more natural recipes, and we have a next generation of entrepreneurs, a term that Christina just said, who are diving in and making things possible with maybe traditional process, but that we can now control better. And so we can harvest more value within each step of the value chain and still being closer to more natural products. And I really like that.
Absolutely, but still mostly we're talking about additives when we are talking ingredients out there. I mean, if you take a look at what the media is talking about, what they are writing about, maybe this is also just like getting attention for a certain issue, getting readers. But I mean, ingredients are so much more than just additives. That's what we've already heard about this, Ian. I mean, what you are doing there, you're actually telling the news story. You are creating the news story out there because you are an ingredient. You are replacing additives that maybe don't have a good the people don't like out there and that are bashed, and that's why protein is bashed. I mean, this is also a story we have to talk about. Why are we only talking about alternative protein when we're talking about ingredients? Because most of them ingredients are used somewhere else as well. So how can we get there? How can we, make this story happen, that we talk about circularity, that we talk about the waste streams? How are you doing this, Ian, out there? How are you, bringing this story to the people?
That's a super nice question, actually. And it touches base also on Christina and Gunnar's points previously. So we want circular ingredients with a smaller footprint. And maybe Protein Distillery could be the next company that, Christina, you can recommend when I speak more about it now. But yes, natural products and natural processes to have these products while overcoming basically what the additives currently add to the plant-based products is something that Protein Distillery is working on and has come up with to have a functional protein that fills these gaps. And you're right, I think we need to have a broader understanding of what an ingredient is. And maybe a shift in perspective of what waste or side streams are and how they could add in creating a circular and more sustainable food system needs to be spoken about. Ingredients, of course, can come from what was previously considered waste or byproducts. And I think in transitioning to this ingredient or understanding what an ingredient is from side streams, I think it's firstly important to recognize the value, to have technology and innovation constantly in process, to have also acceptance both from consumer and the regulations, and then speaking mainly from a startup perspective, to also be viable economically. And maybe I could share my screen and speak a little bit more on how we utilize side streams, both from the input and ourselves. So let me do that. Cool. So at Protein Distillery, what we do is we take the input from brewers' Spenties, or the side stream from the brewing industry, which in Germany is massive. And we work our tiny little magic, and we extract native and fully functional protein out of it. And thus, it's a circular ingredient. It comes from basically the side stream and can feed, hopefully, the world. And the solution is much more than as I tried to explain before as well, is much more than just an additive replacement. Of course, because of its functionality, it can be used in different food verticals, not just, in alternative meats, but also in bakery and in sauces and cheese. But it adds much more than just being a replacement to additives. It's highly nutritious because it has a good protein content. It's a circular ingredient, and yeah. Maybe this is not really very interesting because it speaks more on the technical data, comparing these functional properties to egg protein as well as plant-based protein. But in offering, the main takeaway is to offer a clean label solution to have fewer ingredients on the next generation of plant-based products. And because it's a circular ingredient and also a non-novel ingredient, thus using processes that have been previously used and the product has been previously used, it's on its way to being accessible to all. Yeah, here we speak about the applications in different food verticals. So it's not just, as I said, meat analogs, but also bakery, in alternative dairy, and in replacing eggs. And in being a really sustainable solution, here is our internal LCA that we did comparing it to beef protein and other plant protein like pea, and it's much, much lower in resource utilization. Speaking now also of the side streams that we produce when we make the protein. Of course, we have the main functional protein that we extract, but also through our side stream, which is cell walls and the glutamates, we're constantly valorizing to have like a more resource used solution. So we have in the works a flavor fraction and also the cell walls being used for growth media and for texturates. So hopefully I have been able to also add my 2 cents on what we do and how the side streams are being utilized in all ways.
Definitely. Thank you very much for elaborating on this, because I think it's very important that we get this view on how we can actually, you know, create this new story. And I'm really happy my colleague Vera from Vegconomist, editor at Vegconomist, gathered some insights from today's talk, because what we actually want to achieve with these 45 minutes we have is not only talking about it, then forgetting about it, but maybe really creating something we can take with us, also for the people viewing this web talk. So we've seen we have different concepts and stakeholders, and what would be interesting now is how can we get this all together? I've seen on your presentation, you're talking about clean label solution, non-GMO, non-novel ingredient. This all goes also to this kind of, you know, naturalness discussion. How can we actually maybe also get a bit away from that? Although I know it's important right now to say it's clean label, it's non-GMO, because GMOs actually aren't that bad as far as I know from what people told me, experts. So how can we get there? How can we bring all of this together now and create maybe the new ingredient story? I don't care who wants to get in here and jump in here. Maybe Gunnar, you're the best as marketing expert to, you know, say what story elements can we take food as medicine, a circle ingredient, which I really like. Or should we talk about ingredients at all and maybe stop talking about ingredients and talk about changing the way we eat?
Maybe if I may jump in, I think changing the way we eat to a more natural, to a more nature compliant, and maybe even though which delivers great experiences of taste and enjoyment. That could be our story. So we cannot negate the climate story. We cannot negate that there's something wrong in the way people feed themselves. But we can show them that it's not about alternatives, but about maybe new enjoyment that everybody can step in, and enjoyment that actually is climate friendly, that is good for the environment, and that uses resources mindfully. I think we can actually embrace that idea And I see many companies doing so, and I see Ian on this journey anyway.
But then we're jumping back to the naturalness story. Christina, please jump in.
Well, I just wanted to double down on this point about like food is at its core enjoyment, and it's about connection, and it's, you know, it is about survival, of course, too. And I do think that there's a big opportunity in what I was mentioning earlier, this shift away from just making sustainability the story, because that was marred with a lot of doom and gloom, you know, that we have to feed 10 billion people on a planet that's, you know, in peril, and like the climate emergency. And actually, it turns a lot of people away. They feel, you know, scared, and oftentimes if they're like forced into trying foods that don't meet their like taste expectations, then they, you know, are like, it's not worth it, you know, saving the planet is not worth it. And so instead, if we can reframe the same outcome to what Gunnar was saying, we want climate resiliency, we want to have farmers that are empowered, we want more efficient use of resources, and we want food that's delicious and nutritious, and we can achieve that. We actually, with today's tools and technologies, can create these win-win-win-win-win exponential win outcomes. And it's a positive story for consumers, because there aren't these trade-offs that it used to be, if I want to be sustainable, I have to have food that doesn't taste very good, or that's hard to cook, it's not convenient, or that's too expensive. I think we all need to be moving in this direction of like, we can eliminate these trade-offs and create broader value propositions by taking an all-encompassing view of like the outcomes we want to achieve with the interventions of technology and innovation. And that doesn't just mean, you know, high-tech interventions. It can be innovation around business models and agronomic practices. Another thing that I'm very passionate about when it comes to alternative proteins is the incorporation of underutilized crops and indigenous agricultural practices. We have a lot to learn from, you know, the plethora, the bounty that nature has provided us, and how we can bring that together, marry that together with science and technology to create new outcomes and possibilities. So I think this narrative is one we need to come together and excite the world about, instead of guilting the world into a better food system, because unfortunately that isn't the big motivator for most people. There is a segment that works with, but for most people, it is about pleasure and joy and deliciousness. And that is actually what we can achieve. We have the possibility to achieve.
So for you, it would be bringing more excitement, like that would be going back to the story actually food is about, which is, you know, what I'm always a bit confused about when people are showing their tech and showing labs, and why are we actually going there, and why is this new industry not taking what they're producing? Like some companies are doing a good marketing story out there, no question, but why are most of them talking about the way it is produced? Is this a story we have to tell the people it's produced in a different way because that's where it comes from, why we need it, or why are we doing that? Please.
I don't know if we do. I would like to, you know, shine light on an industry which actually has changed the way we think about it completely. So take a look at the plant-based drinks. Years ago, we would say this is kind of an milk. Nobody's talking about milk anymore. So they're talking, I like oat drinks, I like coconut drinks, and I like almond drinks. So the whole market has shifted completely, and it's about individual enjoyment. There are other factors that are paying into, but now I see many people, if they go to a coffee store, they take a look which oat drink is being put into the coffee, and if it's not the right brand, they're not going into the cafe. So it's back to the enjoyment and what it brings, with many things attached to it. But if we leave enjoyment, I totally agree with Christina, then nobody's going to buy our food.
Well,
still the next generation is changing, but Christina, please.
Well, I just wanted to emphasize the fact that like during this period of transition, oftentimes people get scared, and we see that playing out in the political realm, you know, but they're scared they're going to lose out. Farmers are worried when you bring alternative proteins, if they're a livestock farmer, they're going to go out of business. And so it creates defensiveness and antagonism. if we can start to foster inclusive solutions, you know, that again, open people's minds and show possibility, I think that's a big opportunity for us. And so I'll give like 2 quick examples. One, at an event my organization Thought for Food organized in 2023 in New York, we did a jollof face-off. So jollof is like a famous dish in West Africa, rice dish, and we had chefs from Senegal, Ghana, and Nigeria produce their, you know, jollof according to their like countries' specific recipes. And they're quite competitive, these countries, right, about whose jollof is better. And jollof there is a rice dish that's traditionally served with protein. Well, we served our jollof with Impossible meatballs, actually. So it was an experience for our audience, which was, you know, a bunch of like New Yorker foodies and also global innovators coming together. They had this experience of learning about a culturally relevant dish while also exploring a new alternative protein source. And it created, people didn't even actually know that they were like not real meatballs. And when they learned, it created a whole conversation and a very like interesting conversation about the different cultures and their association with meat products, et cetera. I think you're also seeing in the cultured meat space an interest in blending products, right? Using plant-based with cultured meat, but also cultured meat with traditional meat, again, to just open people's minds, right? It doesn't have to be an either or. This transition can be something we're inclusive of. And there's another company that's in the Netherlands that I'm quite fascinated by called Respect Farms. And they're actually building bioreactors on farms to include farmers in the transition towards cultured meat. I think that's so compelling. And so these kind of like remixed solutions and bringing together, you know, the polarities into new types of conversations, I think will create, again, new pathways for consumer acceptance, can open people's minds to what's possible in the food system. And I think it's really cool, Ian, what you're doing, like you're using a side stream and then you're using your side streams like for, you know, even more possibilities. And again, I agree with you, Gunnar, we shouldn't be talking all the time about scientific technical processes with consumers, but showing them, look what science can do. Like there is no waste, you know, and we're like using everything and it's going in all these directions. It can also excite people and show people like this is a sector filled with possibility. And I know I keep saying that, but I think we need to go there to create the transition that we want to see. And it's going to be about more ideas, more collaboration, you know, and people building bridges between these polarized perspectives.
I really like that aspect. But Ian, you wanted to add something.
Yeah, I just wanted to also agree with what Christina was saying, that sustainability and innovation or having a nutritious end product doesn't need to be separate. You know? It can be a whole package by itself. And the reason to speak more about the technology is because what we've realized is consumers are quite updated on different sources of proteins, where their food comes from. They're more, they just want to make a more informed decision in the end. And it's also by speaking about it and having this collaborative type of partnerships with different stakeholders in the food systems can we help scale and make this whole thing very accessible to all.
Scalability is one, big hurdle out there for several different technologies. Gunnar, do you have, I mean, those were lovely, nice last words, I'd say, because unfortunately we've reached the end of our discussion. Have you got some last words? Do you want to narrow it down to one sentence, maybe what we need out there? What's the story? What did you take from these 45 to 50 minutes?
Enjoy what's possible. I mean, let's be open about food and enjoy more ways to enjoy. I think there's so much more possible. If we stick to the old ways, we are going to die the old ways.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all your thoughts and inspiration. Thank you guys out there for watching us. We're going to share this video later on. And of course, we're also going to share all the insights we put together and give them to you. And yeah, hopefully I'll see you next time at Update. We're going to have this webinar now for each month, one time. And I hope you all feel updated.